Chapter 61. Stubb kills a whale. If to Starbuck the apparition of the squid was a thing of portents, to Queequeg it was quite a different object. "When you see him quid," said the savage, honing his harpoon in the bow of the hoisted boat, "then you see him parm whale." The next day was exceedingly still and sultry, with nothing special to engage them. The Pequod's crew could hardly resist the spell of sleep induced by such a vacant sea. For this part of the Indian Ocean through which we then were voyaging is not what whalemen call a lively ground. That is, it affords few glimpses of porpoises, dolphins, flying fish, and other vivacious denizens of the more stirring waters than those off of the Rio de la Plata or the inshore ground off Peru. It was my turn to stand at the foremast head, and, with my shoulders leaning against the slackened royal shrouds, to and fro, I idly swayed in what seemed an enchanting affair. No resolution could withstand it. In that dreamy mood, losing all consciousness, at last my soul went out of my body, though my body, still connected to sway as a pendulum, will, after the long power which first moved it, is withdrawn. Ere forgetfulness altogether came over me, I had noticed that the seamen at the main and mizzenmast heads were already drowsy, so that at last all three of us lifelessly swung from the spars, and for every swing that we made, there was a nod from below from the slumbering helmsman. The waves, too, nodded their indolent crests, and across the wide trance of the sea, east to west, the sun over all. Suddenly bubbles seemed bursting beneath my closed eyes. Like vices, my hands grasped the shrouds. Some invisible, gracious agency preserved me. With a shock I came back to life, and lo, close under our lee, not 40 fathoms off, a gigantic sperm whale lay rolling in the water like a capsized hull of a frigate, his broad glossy back an Ethiopian hue, glistening in the sun's rays like a mirror, but lazily undulating in the trough of the sea, and ever and anon tranquilly spouting his vapory jet. The whale looked like a portly burgher smoking his pipe of a warm afternoon. But that pipe, poor whale, was thy last. As if struck by some enchanter's wand, the sleepy ship and every sleeper in it all at once started into wakefulness, and more than a score of voices from all parts of the vessel, simultaneously with the three notes from aloft, shouted forth the accustomed cry, as the great fish slowly and regularly spouted the sparkling brine into the air. "Clear the boats! Luff!" cried Ahab, and obeying his own order, he dashed the helm down before the helmsman could even handle the spokes. The sudden exclamations of the crew must have alarmed the whale, and ere the boats were down majestically turning, he swam away to the leeward, but with such steady tranquillity, and making so few ripples as he swam, that thinking after all he might not as yet be harmed. Ahab gave orders that not an oar should be used, and no man must speak but in whispers. So seated like Ontario Indians in the gunwales of the boats, we swiftly but silently paddled along, the calm not admitting of the noiseless sails being set. Presently, as we glided in the chase, the monster perpendicularly flitted his tail 40 feet into the air, and then sank out of sight like a tower swallowed up. "There go flukes," was a cry, an announcement immediately followed by Stubbs producing his match and igniting his pipe. For now a respite was granted. After the full interval of his sounding had elapsed, the whale arose again, and, being now in advance of the smoker's boat, and much nearer to it than any of the others, Stubb counted upon the honor of the capture. It was obvious now that the whale had at length become aware of his pursuers. All silence of cautiousness was therefore no longer of use. Paddles were dropped and oars came loudly into play, and still puffing at his pipe, Stubb cheered on his crew to the assault. Yes, a mighty charge had come over the fish. All alive to his jeopardy, he was going head out, that part obliquely projecting from the mad yeast which he brewed. It will be seen in some other place of what a very light substance the entire interior of a sperm whale's enormous head consists. Although apparently the most massive, it is by far the most buoyant part of him, so that with ease he elevates it in the air, and invariably does so when going at his utmost speed. Besides, such is the breadth of the upper part of the front of his head, and such the tapering cut for water formation of the lower part, that by obliquely elevating his head, he thereby may be said to transform himself from a bluff-bowed, sluggish galley into a sharp-pointed New York pilot boat. Starter, starter, my men, don't hurry yourselves. Take plenty of time, but starter, starter like thunderclaps. That's all, cried Stubb, sputtering out the smoke as he spoke. Starter now, give 'em the long and strong stroke, Tashtigo. Starter, Tash, my boy, starter. But keep cool, cucumbers is a word. Easy, easy, only starter like the grim death and grinning devils, and raise the buried dead perpendicular out of their graves, boy. That's all, starter. Woohoo, wahee, screamed the gay header in reply, raising some old war whoop to the sky, as every oarsman in the strained boat involuntarily bounced forward with the tremendous leading stroke which the eager Indian gave. But his wild screams were answered by others quite as wild. Ki-hee, ki-hee, yelled Daggoo, straining forward and backwards on his seat like a pacing tiger in his cage. Kala, Kaloo, howled Queequeg, as if smacking his lips over a mouthful of grenadier steak. And thus with oars and yells and the keels cut the sea. Meanwhile, Stubb, retaining his place in the van, still encouraged his men to the onset, all the while puffing the smoke from his mouth. Like desperadoes, they tugged and they strained till the welcome cry was heard. Stand up, Tashtigo, give it to 'em. The harpoon was hurled. Stern all, the oarsmen backed water in the same moment something went hot and hissing along every one of their wrists. It was the magical line. An instant before, Stubb had swiftly caught 2 additional turns with it round the loggerhead, whence, by reason of its increasing rapid circlings, a hempen blue smoke now jetted up and mingled with the steady fumes from his pipe. As the line passed round and round the loggerhead, also, just before reaching that point, it blisteringly passed through and through both of Stubb's hands, from which the handcloths or squares of quilted canvas sometimes worn at these times had accidentally dropped. It was like holding an enemy's sharp 2-edged sword by the blade, and that enemy all the time striving to wrest it out of your clutch. Wet the line, cried Stubb to the tub oarsman, him seated by the tub, who, snatching off his hat, dashed sea-water onto it. More turns were taken so that the line began holding its place. The boat now flew through the boiling water like a shark all fins. Stubb and Tashtigo here changed places, stem for stern, a staggering business in truly rocking commotion. Partly to show the indispensableness of the act, it may be here stated that in the old Dutch fishery a mop was used to dash the running line with water. In many other ships a wooden piggin or bailer is set apart for that purpose. Your hat, however, is the most convenient. From the vibrating line extending the entire length of the upper part of the boat, and from it now being more tight than a harp string, you would have thought that the craft had 2 keels, one cleaving the water, the other the air, as the boat churned on through both opposing elements at once. A continual cascade played at the bows, a ceaseless worrying eddy in her wake, and at the slightest motion from within, even but a little finger, the vibrating, crackling craft canted over her spasmodic gunwale into the sea. Thus they rushed, each man with might and main clinging to his seat to prevent being tossed into the foam, and the tall form of Tashtigo at the steering oar crouching almost double in order to bring down his center of gravity. Whole Atlantics and Pacifics seemed past as they shot their way, till the length of the whale somewhat slackened in his flight. Haul in, cried Stubb to the bowsman, and, facing round towards the whale, all hands began pulling the boat up to him, while yet the boat was being towed on. Soon, ranging up by his flank, Stubb, firmly planting his knee in the clumsy cleat, darted dart after dart into the flying fish at the word of command, the boat alternately sterning out of the way of the whale's horrible wallow, and then ranging up for another fling. The red tide now poured from all sides of the monster like brooks down a hill. His tormented body rolled not in brine but in blood, which bubbled and seethed for furlongs behind their wake. The slanting sun playing upon this crimson pod in the sea sent back its reflection into every face, so that they all glowed to each other like red men. And all the while jet after jet of white smoke was agonizingly shot from the spiracle of the whale, and vehement puff after puff from the mouth of the excited helmsman, as at every dart hauling in upon his crooked lance by the line attached to it, Stubb straightened it again and again by a few rapid blows against the gunwale. then again and again sent it into the whale. Pull up, he now cried to the bowsman as the waning whale relaxed his wrath. Pull up, close to, and the boat ranged along the fish's flank. When reaching far over the bow, Stubb turned his long, sharp lance into the fish and kept it there, carefully churning and churning, as if cautiously seeking to feel after some gold watch that the whale might have swallowed, and which he was fearful of breaking ere he could hook it out. But that gold watch he sought was the innermost life of the fish, and now it is struck, for starting from his trance into that unspeakable thing called his flurry, the monster horribly wallowed in his blood, overwrapped himself in impenetrable, mad, boiling spray, so that the imperiled craft, instantly dropping astern, had much ado blindly struggle out of from that frenzied twilight into the clear air of the day. And now, abating in his fury, the whale once more rolled out into view, surging from side to side, spasmodically dilating and contracting his spout hole, with sharp, cracking, agonizing respirations. At last, gush after gush of clotted red gore, as if it had been the purple lees of red wine, shot into the frightened air, and falling back again, ran dripping down its motionless flanks into the sea. His heart had burst. He's dead, Mr. Stubb, said Daggoo. Yes, both pipes smoked out, and withdrawing from his own mouth, Stubb scattered the dead ashes over the water, and for a moment stood thoughtfully eyeing the vast corpse he made. This is the end of chapter 61. So I recorded it, I thought I uploaded it, and then I deleted it, but apparently I didn't upload it, which is why 62 dropped before 61, and I didn't see that I missed a chapter. So this is a kind of long and kind of gory chapter. Couple of interesting things. They talk about the line, and there's an entire chapter devoted to the line being wrapped around the loggerhead, and you have the whale pulling the boat. So here you have Stubb, who's out ahead of everybody in terms of, because he just happened to be lucky where the whale popped up. And then Tashtego spears the whale, harpoons the whale, and the harpoon is attached to a line, and so the whale takes off and takes the boat with it. So here you have people holding onto the boat, and whales can go 45 miles an hour. So this whale is just making speed. You know, this is like galloping horse fast. This is faster than they're used to going, fast, maybe even faster than some of them have ever gone before. And so this whale is just flying through the water, pulling them along beside. And the rope's playing out. The line's playing out. So they don't have the line taut against the boat, because that could tear the boat apart. But it plays out. And it was going through Stubb's hands. And it said, you know, it was described as like grabbing an enemy's two-edged sword. So imagine, you know, you grab a knife and, you know, cut your hand, obviously. Well, this is the same sort of thing that happened, because he got a rope burn from the rope going by so fast, it just like cut his hands. And it would wear through loggerheads. There's all sorts of places where you see ropes, wires on pulleys. But if the wire jumps off the pulley and rubs on something else, the wire can just like wear through the metal of the pin holding the pulley. Or I've seen that happen a bunch of places. Or if a rope commonly goes over a section of dock, you see this a lot. Where if you have this line that constantly goes over a section of dock, or a dog's leash, you'll often see like a dog being tied up with a chain, and the chain swings off of the post that the dog is attached to on the porch. So you have a wooden porch, you have a metal chain, and the chain swings back and forth, and you can see the indentations of the links as they slowly wear down after all of this. Now you have metal on wood, and so wood's fairly hard, not like the soft flesh of your hands. And so here you have this rope which is going zipping through Stubb's hands. It gets him caught. And you also have the parallels here between Stubb smoking his pipe and the whale's billows. Because, as I've mentioned in previous chapters, inside of whales, mammals, they're endothermic. They are warmer than their surrounding water. You know, the inside of a whale is like the inside of a person. It's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37, 38 Celsius. And it's incredibly humid because, 70% water. So you have this hot, moist air, and whenever it blows out, whenever it exhales, just like you on a cold day, when you blow out, the water condenses. Except with the whale, it's a whole lot more of it. So you have all of this hot, humid air being blown out by the whale because whales are big and they retain a lot of heat, and so they have to dump the heat somehow. So a lot of the heat gets blown out that way. Anyway, so a lot of the heat gets blown out that way. And so you have these clouds of vapor and steam, plus, of course, the whales come from underwater, and because it's come from underwater, there's going to be water on top of where the blowhole is and things like that. So you have some normal water being blown out, but you also have a lot of hot, moist air being blown out. So that is the end of chapter 61, and that's it.